everyone. Thank you for being with us this evening for this very exciting moment in the Rabbit Hole story. Debbie and Pete and all of their team have been working really hard to get us to this point, and lighting the third bunny on the roof of our building is truly represents so much generosity, and I'm really, really delighted to have you share in this moment with us. My name is Diane Power, and it is my honor and joy to serve as the chair of the board of directors for the Rabbit Hole, along with 8 other dedicated Kansas City folks and one from New York. We all share in having just the good fortune to join Debbie and Pete to help bring the Rabbit Hole to life. We all immediately fell in love with their audacious dream the first time we even heard them mention the Rabbit Hole, and it's just been a joy ever since to be involved. So I want to thank them, all the board members, for their tireless energy and devotion to the project. And I also want to thank our National Advisory Board. We have this amazing group of influential authors, illustrators, and book experts that are really not only giving us access and connections within the book industry, but also just extreme validation for what we're doing and helping the industry really embrace and be part of our project. We have been undergoing fundraising for many years. Many of you know that. That's why you're watching us tonight, because you've been so generous. But I really want to thank our capital campaign steering committee for getting us to this momentous place in our success. And finally, I just really want to thank all the donors. You have made this possible for Kansas City and for the world to see the first Exploratorium. And we're just really excited to be in a place where we can see not only we're at this great fundraising goal, but we also know that we're going to open this year, and we have the strength and the momentum to really bring this to life this year. So we can't wait for you to all be part of it. Some people have been involved since the earliest days and believed in our vision. Others may have just gotten involved lately, but we just can't wait for you all to experience the Rabbit Hole when we open our doors later this year. I know I keep saying we're going to light the last bunny, but before we do, I wanted to also just share another little surprise with you. So before we go up on the roof to light the bunny, I want you to be in on a very special secret. This is the premiere of our behind the scenes view of the Great Green Room. Enjoy.
In the Great Green Room, there was a telephone and a red balloon and a picture of
Goodnight Moon is a complicated book. I mean, it's simple in its structure. I think a lot of people today look at Goodnight Moon and think, well, I have to buy that just because. So there's sort of an inertia behind it. But the truth is, Goodnight Moon, it took years for it to become what it became as a classic. And it really started out its life cycle as not a popular book. That challenged a lot of the norms of children's literature at the time in the late 40s.
You know, just personally, that book, I realized that after Sally was born, and Pete and I made this little space for her at the bookstore, and we turned it into the Goodnight Moon room. It was very janky, but it was kind of our first foray into environments and thinking about taking a children's book and recreating its environment in a space. The second time we made the Goodnight Moon room was kind of maybe the last 5 or 7 years of the Reading Reptile, and it was we had a space, and we I don't know, we just wanted to try it again on a pretty small scale, but in a way that kids could interact with it, and it was really satisfying because it's an immediate reaction, and both by kids and parents. And they would sit on the bed and they would look in the drawers, and it was again pretty rinky-dink, but it kind of was an escalation from the first attempt at it.
The Goodnight Moon exhibit was always in the plan from the beginning when we started the project in 2015, but it was took real shape when we bought the building in 2018.
Goodnight Room.
We wanted our room to be really unique, and so we thought, okay, well, we'll make it really big, because then adults can feel small again too. You know, it kind of brings back that rush of emotion, and kids are going to respond to it whether it's tiny or big. but for an adult to sit on the bed with the kid just seemed more magical.
We decided right away that it would be connected to the bookstore and would be more of a publicly available exhibit that anybody could see just walking into the building. The first thing I think we built was the dollhouse, and you know, I think there were a couple of tries on that, and we kept looking at it and saying, no, that's not right, it's not right.
We did small scale modeling. It wasn't really until we did the actual size cardboard modeling that we, I think we knew it would work, but you know, I think that how well it worked is pretty amazing.
Right behind me is the Goodnight Moon Room. We're in the design phase. The book only has one vantage point, and that vantage point is several feet in the air looking down into the room. Our audience won't be in that position because there's a wall there. So we had to figure out how to take our audience's vantage point, bring it down onto the floor, and then bring it into the room.
When we would look at the book and examine a perspective of a certain piece of furniture and make an adjustment to that piece of furniture, either based off of the math that was in the book or a gut feeling, it would often start a whole domino effect of other problems. And so it put us in the position of like having to choose, you know, like which things do we need to keep in some of that like kind of like whimsical feel where it's you know, not level, and which things need to remain level.
When I was designing the furniture, and then when I was starting to execute building the furniture, they were building the walls, and at the same time they were changing the angles of the walls, and then I would be like, great, now I gotta change the angles of my furniture. But it was only by a little bit, it was no big deal.
Goodnight Light and the Red Balloon.
The colors in the illustrations are very clean and saturated. You know, there's black line, and so those things were easy to really identify.
Every edition has a little bit different green or a little different orange or a little different yellow. And then you have to think about, well, what are those relationships going to be like at this scale? And a lot of the colors, to me, early on when we had some of the actual furniture being made, looked off. But then when I held the book up to it, or several books, you know, you would see, well, this is really, really close. But when you bring it into the real world, it's like, it doesn't quite look right.
So some of the reds and things, like people have a memory of it being more, you know, like one style of red versus tomato red or something. And it, on its own, when you take it out of the Goodnight Moon Room, the colors are weird, and there's something that could be argued about. But once you start putting it next to that much green and around the other things, you watch the red physically change in front of your eyes into something different because it vibrates differently.
That was one of the reasons they weren't sure about the ceiling, is how light bouncing off from the ceiling would affect the color of the green. If it was white or if it was blue, would that change the green color in the room? It was a lot of coats of green paint. There was I think we had to put 3 coats of paint on the walls because it's such a deep color to get it to the right opacity.
So in terms of technical challenges, the first thing I looked at was the moon and determining how that was going to move. Is it going to be a projection or something physical? I think given the nature of the illustrations, it felt like it should be something more tangible. I typically look to industrial automation equipment. So what's an easy approach to that? So it's a screw drive. So it's basically a big long metal rod that has screw threads on it, and a motor turns that at the ends, and this little shaft, the element rides on that shaft.
A kid could probably hang on this thing and
not damage it. And so as the moon is at its apex, the room is actually at its darkest, because that's like midnight or whatever. And then it cycles back down. As the moon physically tracks back down, the room gets lighter again.
Good night clocks and good night socks.
We're creating a space that you walk into and immediately feel like you're in a different, not just a different place, but a different time.
And then there's the sort of hidden nuances that maybe that you don't necessarily experience the first time, but come out as you experience the room more. I mean, anytime you're interpreting a story, it's sort of, you're connecting to memories, your own memories. Also want to look at, how many senses can you stimulate to sort of bring that story to life.
Just thinking about accessibility issues or different ways that people listen to story or read stories or hear stories, trying to capture that in all the exhibits, but to be able to pick up the phone and hear it being read is pretty cool, and then knowing it's the son of the illustrator.
It gets such a reaction from people when they pick it up and play with it. Figuring out how to make that in a durable way and also capture the form. When it works out, it's pretty rewarding.
It takes it beyond the idea of just like entering a stage set or a painting. It meets the expectations of what people would, expect those certain items to do. So a big old rocking chair actually moving forward ends up satisfying people's imagination.
When we first made it, I went upstairs and got Mary Claire to set, threw a piece of plywood on it. She had to jump up on top of it to set in it. And we tested it with her and she almost fell over. So we had to counterweight it. It has like 150 pounds of metal in the rear end of it so that it doesn't flip over. And then we dropped it to the ground. We chopped it, I think about 8 inches.
We did have a lot of choices to make as far as how we wanted the room to feel. And I think everyone agreed that in the end that we needed a soft part of it. So the bed and the floor, and we have the rug and the slippers.
The mittens, the fur wall was just something that I don't know how it came about, but we always wanted it because of Margaret Wise Brown's love of fur, and just thought it would be crazy to have a whole, because you don't ever see the back wall, and just have it all be fur.
So we made a grid of Z-clips on the wall, which are fancy French cleats, and then created these panels and then laminated the fur to them, which is pretty simple if you just say it like that. But given that these panels are almost 12 feet tall, 4 feet wide, and they have to be seamless and mate perfectly with each other, that made it a real challenge. We were able to accomplish that. It was pretty hair-raising, but we did it.
Make a fur angel. Come on, Deb. Okay, go.
It's very subtle. And there have been people who've been in the room that didn't even know the fur was there. And that's a cool thing too, where they'll look for it or they'll discover it or somebody else will mention it.
And good night to the old lady whispering hush.
For me, walking into the Great Green Room, it was very magical and visceral in a way of suddenly finding yourself in this room that is so familiar, but has always been just on the page or in your imagination. So to see it come to life was a really magical thing that I am sure kids are going to love. And their parents too, because this is a book that is shared across generations.
Stepping into the room, it just felt as cozy as reading the book. And it is, I was saying to somebody, Goodnight Moon is a perfect book because it's just everything that you want. It's comfort, and especially with everything that we've been going through, This is really a time that we need a lot of comfort. So having comfort in the form of an experience is absolutely incredible. I think my favorite part of the room is the telephone, walking over and picking it up and hearing the voice. I had to put it down because I started crying.
Well, I think my father would have loved yours because the rabbit hole one, because you can walk into it and you can sit on the chair and you can lie on the bed and you can really interact with it. There's been lots of them made, but most of them have a little rope in front, so you can't get in them. And I think you guys are brave to do that. And I think it's really wonderful you're doing that. And I think Clem would love that, you know, to be able to go inside and really touch things. It's an extraordinary book, and it fascinates me. It always fascinates me. How did it come about? What is it that makes it interesting? You know, it seems incredibly simple, but it's also extremely deep and wide open and vast kind of book. It has that strange thing of little tiny things, a little tiny mouse, and then sort of the cosmos.
I hope there will be times when people will be able to just be in it and be quiet with themselves, because I think it does have a power that is even more special than just walking into the great green room. It's a power that brings the room back inside, and that's an opportunity that you don't get to have in a lot of different spaces.
Good night, stars. Good night, air. Good night, noises everywhere.
Hey, Deb, Pete, hey, you guys. Hey, it's time to light the bunny. Debbie, Pete, wake up. Come on.
Oh man, what day is this?
So tired. So tired.
Ah,
I know you're tired.
2022 is a hard year, but a great year. And we made it a long way with your help. And want to thank Diane and the board and everybody who helped us get to where we are now. We have a lot coming up, a lot of work to do in 23, Year of the Rabbit.
Also want to say thank you to our fabulous crew of fabricators and makers of all sorts of beautiful things.
Yeah, like this mouse. So I'm gonna hide it. So, thank you everyone for coming tonight. Thank you to everyone who we forgot to thank. And I think
it's time.
it's time.
I think it's time.
We should. What should we do?
I'm going to make a phone call.
All right.
If I. Okay, great. It's time to light the bunny.
Woo! Yay! It worked. Hooray! Well, thank you again, and good night, cucumber.
Good night, fly.